Hello and welcome to the Oddschecker betting show. This is the glorious Goodwood Day 1 preview here, recording this on Monday afternoon, so just the day before racing. I'm your host, George Elek, and I'm joined by two expert tipsters as our guests today to run through the card on Tuesday, day 1 of glorious Goodwood. Oddschecker's very own Andy Holding and tipster Rory Delargy as well. The best panel, I would say, as a viewer of this podcast, as a viewer of this video and listener to this podcast, the two expert tipsters we've got here. And Andy, fair to say, we're coming to a man in form after a tricky start to July. Yeah, you certainly turned it around last week.
Yeah, we were just talking off air, weren't we? That July has been a struggle. I don't know what Rory's felt about the July. You know, the height of summer, as it were, where we've had loads and loads of action. Just constantly being on the wrong side of races and just getting it wrong. But yeah, last few days just clicked. Everything clicked. You know, Ascot was good the last 2 days. So at least coming in here into this podcast with a better frame of mind than I would have been had things not gone my way Saturday.
I think there are a fair few Andy Holding disciples getting quite excited with a multi in their bet basket on Saturday. The first three went in, didn't they? Did you have anything on the multi?
I did. Funny enough, both days. I don't know why. I put all 5 in. I put 5 in on Friday and 5 in on Saturday, and I thought, well, there's a good chance that they'll all be in the frame. But of course, as it turned out, the last one let us down. But they all ran well, which is the main thing. That's what you hope for on a Saturday. I mean, you know, when you're dealing with 30-runner handicaps, as Rory knows, I mean, a lot of it's rubber the green, and you're just hoping they run all right. You know, 5-6 plays, you think, well, if I can get one in the frame here and it runs okay, then you've done the job. But yeah, to go and win is a bit of a bonus really on days like that.
Well, whether it's good luck or good form, let's hope it continues into this week. Rory, how are you getting on at the moment with your tipping?
I'm struggling to find. I know Andy said he's struggling to find winners in July. I've been struggling to find runners. I've managed to produce a remarkable series of non-runners, which is probably not a bad thing, really.
It's because you're nicking the price, so the owners have to put them out.
Epic endeavour at Ascot at the weekend, but luckily he turns out at Goodwood, so I'm hoping I can just transfer my allegiance there. But it's not been an easy month. Traditionally, July is the best month for punters. You know, if you speak to bookmakers, they'll say the profit margin tends to dip badly in July, sort of end of June through July, first half of August, and from then on, it gets a lot easier for them. From my point of view, I much prefer the later stages of the season, to be honest. And you know, maybe not quite as late as October and November, but when things change a little bit, and you've got to look deeper to find winners. That suits me a lot better, rather than midsummer, where it's often, you know, horses who are in form or winning races at shortish prices. That doesn't tend to help me enormously, because I try to look for things that are not blindingly obvious. But I've survived. That's the main thing.
That's good. I think looking ahead to this week's racing, we've got to talk about the weather, because in the last 10 days or so, the UK has seen everything from 34, 33 degree heat to flash floods where I am in London. Driving back yesterday into London, I mean, I was quite concerned that the car was going to start floating rather than driving down the road. So what can we expect from what you can tell, Rory, for the weather and therefore the ground conditions down at Goodwood?
Well, Goodwood, I'm not sure there's going to be an awful lot of rain from the end of Tuesday onwards. Looking at the forecast, it looks set fair. So to live up to its glorious billing. But there was a lot of rain yesterday. There was well over an inch of rain at Goodwood yesterday, and there's going to be a little bit of rain around Monday and Tuesday as well. So we're probably going to start on ground that's very close to soft, and then we'll gradually be getting towards good ground then by the middle of the week. But you will need horses who handle a bit of give. I don't think it's going to get desperate. I mean, obviously, if you're living in London, you're seeing the flooding that's going on there. You kind of expect the track might be half underwater, but I don't think it's quite that bad. And I think it was in pretty good shape before the heavy rain yesterday. So you know, I don't think we're going to see strange race. I don't think they're going to be coming across to the stand side rail as they can do in very bad ground at Goodwood. I think mostly the racing will be developing as we expect at Goodwood, more towards the far side. But we're definitely going to be starting on ground that's possibly a soft side of good to soft. I think the advance going currently is soft, good to soft in places, but I don't think that's going to be getting worse before the meeting starts. So we might well be starting on something close to good to soft.
Yeah, so good to soft, or maybe even soft ground expected for tomorrow, with the ground drying through the week, with the weather looking okay at Goodwood. As I say, we're recording this at midday on Monday, so not long more than 24 hours until the racing gets underway, and we're going to kick off with the first race in just a second. Run through the first 5 races of the day in chronological order, and then throw it to the 2 expert tipsters here for any other business in the last 3 races of the 8 race cards. Before we get into the racing, just going to point you in the direction of the oddschecker app. We're going to be talking today in terms of the best prices and the best place terms, but you can also find bookie offers, free bets, and plenty other things in there as well, including Andy's tips every morning of racing direct to the app. So please do download the app now. And as I say, we'll start now with the 150, the Unibet Euro Chesterfield Cup Handicap, over a mile and 2 furlongs. And Migration is the favourite, just about favourite, at 6-1 in an open race. Maydani 13-2. Majestic Dawn 8-1, Caradoc 9-1. It's Good to Laugh, Johnny Drama, and Cockalorum 10-1, 12-1 bar. Skybet sticking their neck out with 7 places, a 5th, 7 places, a fair few firms, Paddy's and Hills, Betfair, all going 6 places. And Andy, will come to you here, an intriguing favourite in Migration, who had 1 run back after a lengthy absence. So do you think deserving of the place at the top of the market?
Yeah, on balance, I think he should be up there. Yeah, whether he should be outright favourite, you could argue that until the cows come home. But he was a massive eye catcher, wasn't he? First time out at Salisbury, I think everyone put him into their mythical notebooks that day. He's his first one, as you say, for a little while. I think he's been off for thick under 2 years, and
641 day break.
Yeah, he was heavily punted as well, which suggested he was, ready to strut his stuff first time out. I think he was 8-9-1 into 4-1 in what looked a competitive field, and he probably would have won with a clearer run, arguably. Just didn't get the rub of the green, slow away, blah blah blah, and then ran into trouble at in the hottest part of the race. I think he's probably better over a mile and a quarter. I think Rory can probably back that up when he chats about the race in a second or two. So that run over a mile was a precursor to what is we're likely to see at Goodwood, and we know that David Marnussier, his horses are in great form. They have been all season. I think he's really come of age this season, David Marnussier. Not as though he was by any means a back number the last couple of years. So yeah, I could certainly see him going well. Maydani would be more ground reliant than Migration, who's got form on good to soft. As far as I could see, Maydani won this race last year as a good to firm ground horse, so I don't think conditions will be against him. So if they're out to the front 2 in the market, I'd certainly prefer Migration. I think Cockalorum's got to be on the shortlist. He's a strong stayer at the trip. He's running the John Smiths was a very commendable one. It's very hard to make the running at York on that round track, and barring a very tenacious Johnny Drama, he was the only one that got by him. And he's got plenty of soft ground form as well, Cockalorum. Could see him going well. And there's also one that makes quite a bit of appeal at a huge price as well. I know Rory likes his big priced horses, about a 20-25 to 1 shot. Bugle Major, a difficult one to weigh up because he was disappointing the first time for Richard Hughes, but he ran much better in the Hunt Cup. It's one of those races where you need to go back and have a look at his run, but there was a whole host of them at the Standside Row which didn't get any kind of a clear run that day, and he was one of them. I put him down into my sort of notebook. And the form of the Hunt Cup has worked out incredibly well. I think it was a very strong renewal this year. I think we're genuinely looking at group horses. Certainly the winner is, and there's been a lot of horses that have come out in that race and franked the form from either side of the track. He could be one that slipped under the radar. So I'm certainly prepared to have more than a healthy look at Cockalorum. I see he's in and around the 10-12 to 1 mark, and if I could get, let's say, 20-25 to 1, 5-6 places for Bugle Major, but I'll be half tempted to play him as well.
Yeah, Cockalorum 10-1 across the board at the moment. Bugle Major 25 to 1 best price, but that's with 365, who are a quarter to 4. If you wanted your extra places, you're probably going to be going to William Hill 22 to 1, 5th, the 6 places. Rory, how are you seeing this opener?
I do quite like Migration. He's been due to run since that Salisbury race where he very much caught the eye. I think he was in a Newmarket and was taken out on quickish ground. conditions will be absolutely fine for him. I think he deserves to be up towards the head of the market, but he is pretty well found at the same time. I think you're going to get the price you're expected by migration, and there is obviously a marginal chance that on his second start back after a long layoff, he might be vulnerable. But the impression I get is that he's been carefully prepared for this, and I think he will give his running. And as Andy says, I prefer him to Maidani on the ground. Typically, I will be looking for something at a slightly bigger price. A couple that catch the eye here. It's Good to Laugh. You wouldn't expect to be taking a Jenny Candlish runner at Goodwood, but he ran right to form on his first start for Jenny Candlish at a massive price. He went off at 50 to 1 at Chester last time out, minus the headgear he'd worn for Clive Cox, and he ran very well. To be second, only beaten Short Head. So he races off a £2 higher mark now, but that was the mark he was on his last start for Clive Cox. Seemed to lose his way just in his last couple of starts for the Cox Yard. And on that basis, you'd be slightly wary of him. But the fact that he bounced back to his very best form, starting out for New Yard, suggests that he'll keep going the right way. And Oisin Murphy's an interesting booking for him. I think he's been hard to win with through his career. He's never won a handicap, but he's run lots of solid races to be placed. And I think he's the obvious one in terms of picking up extra places in this contest. And the one I like as an outsider, I know Andy's put one up there as well, but I've been with him the last twice, and he hasn't had the rub of the green. Victory Chime, who was a good second at Epsom to the Manuisier handicap plot. He then went to Royal Ascot and made the running, which was the wrong tactics on that occasion, and he ended up being well beaten in the end in the Wolferton Stakes, although not beaten that far in terms of distance. But he raced too freely in front with a visor on for the first time. He then ran in the John Smith's Cup last time out, and I thought he ran pretty well in a fairly messy race. I half fancy his chances of turning the tables with Cockalorum. He's a much bigger price. Oddly enough, for the John Smith's Cup, they didn't go hell for leather there. It was a reasonably steady pace and a bit of a sprint finish, which I don't think saw Victory Chime to best effect. He's got good form at Epsom. I think Goodwood will suit him really well. He's a course and distance winner here in the past. He's only dropped a pound, but he's now a pound lower than when second to a horse who was very well handicapped at Epsom. And I think that gives him a decent chance on paper, and he's a 25 to 1 shot generally. So I think there's value in him as well. He's drawn a stall 15. And theoretically, you'd be told a lot at Goodwood that you've got to be drawn low. But that depends what trip you're running over. And what often happens at Goodwood is, the turns are pretty tight here. And a lot of the time, if you just watch the start of races, you'll find that horses drawn in the middle tend to come off worst. When it comes to track position coming out of the first bend. Low numbers are historically favoured, but if you're drawn high and you've got a little bit of toe, you generally avoid trouble early on, and it can be an advantage then in the home straight to have clear sailing. Whereas often if you're drawn towards the inside and you're behind horses, a lot of horses are going well up the straight at Goodwood, just have nowhere to go in the last furlong and a half, and it's those who've got the ability to come out a little bit wider, who can be favoured. So I don't mind a horse who's drawn high as long as I know they've got the run style that will get them a good track position, and that should be fine for Victory Chime.
Victory Chime, best price 25 to 1. As you say, may have finished down the pecking order last time out, but only beaten 5.5 lengths by the winner of that race, Johnny Drama. 25 to 1 with Bet Victor, who are 5th to 5. If you want 7 places, you're getting 22 to 1 with Sky Bet. And the other one you mentioned positively, as well as the favourite Migration, was It's Good to Laugh, who is 10 to 1 with most firms as well. On then to the second race on the card, and it's the Vintage Stakes, the Unibet Vintage Stakes, where Berkshire Shadow is the 15 to 8 favourite, ahead of LaSalle at 9 to 4. Eldrick Jones 9 to 2. The Acropolis is a sea of blue on oddschecker at the moment, still a bit of 8 to 1 around with William Hill. Angel Blue 14 to 1, Austrian Theory 22s, and Secret Strength 33 to 1. Just the 7 runners, Andy. Disaster, although Betfair Sportsbook are giving you 3 places if you did want to have an each way bet. And Andy, how are you seeing this?
First and foremost, I think the betting for this race is the wrong way around with the front two. I think Lascelles got the stronger form. I think the July Stakes that he won was a deeper field. It brought together all of the Royal Ascot horses and also chucked in a few floaters, if you like the second horse, Asymmetric. And the time figure certainly suggests that as well. I mean, the Coventry Stakes wasn't a slowly run race by any stretch of the imagination. But we've got Lascelles July Stakes by far and away the best 2-year-old race so far, certainly over 6 furlongs anyway. And he looks as though he's just come of age to me as well. He got beat by Angel Blur at Pontefract on his second start, when he still looked a little bit not quite there, a little bit unfurnished. But his Newmarket win, the run afterwards was very good on the clock. The third horse, I think, has franked that form as well, and the second for good measure. There was a bit of giving the ground that day as well, so that's an important point to make. And like I say, the July Stakes, he had every chance to shirk that day. They went at an unbelievably strong pace. I think it was Project Dancing, Dig 2 that come up the stand side rail. They took each other on, and he was leading that echelon down the middle, and he kept on well when Asymmetric came at him. I just like him. He's just a thoroughly professional horse. I don't really see 7 furlongs being a problem. I think Richard Hannon saying after his interview that day he'll get on the mile, no problem. He certainly got the run start to give himself a chance of getting further. But yeah, like I say, I prefer him to Berkshire Shadows. Had 2 runs, 2 wins on good to firm ground, so we don't know whether he'll stay. And as I said, I don't think his form of the Coventry is anywhere near the standard of a Lascelles race. So I think the betting is wrong there. He can make cases out for Angel Blur. He's entitled to have a better chance than his current quotes 14-1 based on the Pontefract run. Edric Jones took a backward step last time. Acropolis, not really that convinced by him up to now. And I don't really like the other 2. So, as I said, I'd make Lascelles a fairly confident vote here. I'd have him in shorter than 9-4. I think that's a fair price.
Yeah, 9-4 with Bet365, Paddy Power, and Betfair Sportsbook. Rory, you seeing this in a similar way?
Largely, I agree with Andy. The only negative I would put forward for Lascelles, I'm not absolutely convinced he wants a well-run 7 furlongs. He could well do, but his best run has come in that in a stronger run 6 at Newmarket. He did win over 7 prior to that, but he was able to dominate, set his own fractions. And there's a slight question mark about whether a really well-run 7 will suit him. But then again, this might not be a really well-run 7, and of course it's a pretty sharp track as well, so he should get away with it. I agree the Coventry form's not weak as such, but it's misleading because they went a ridiculous pace early on there, really set it up for the horses who came from the back of the field. Berkshire Shadow, he's 1-2 from 2, so I don't think you can knock him too much. But the fact that Eldrick Jones was well beaten at Newmarket behind Lascelles, and he came with a similar run to Berkshire Shadow in the Coventry, that suggests that he's a little bit flattered by it. The other thing to mention about the July Stakes, I think there was an advantage to be drawn away from the stands rail in that race. They went at strong pace. Those who raced towards the stand rail ended up being well beaten. The horses who came up the middle were favoured on the day. Now, they may just have been the best horses as well, but I think while perhaps the bias at Newmarket was overplayed at times, I think that it definitely existed in that race, the way it was run, and it wasn't a great advantage to be drawn near the rail. But as Andy says, the speed figure that Lascelles produced in victory is very solid. It was a well-run race, and you'd be more positive about him than you would about most of these. I think I'd agree. I think he deserves to be favourite on paper. It wouldn't be a massive surprise to see Berkshire Shadow improve again, but as Andy intimates, there are slight question marks about him. We don't know whether he'll stay the trip. There's nothing in the Coventry that I know he was strong at the finish, but that doesn't necessarily indicate the stamina for this trip. He was just particularly well suited by the way the race was run. In saying that, he pretty much needed the run in his debut despite winning, so he could improve a fair bit more. And the fact that Andrew Baldwin runs him here rather than the Richmond, for example, suggests that he thinks he'll stay. So, I wouldn't necessarily be breaking the piggy bank to lay Berkshire Shadow, but I'd agree that strictly speaking on what they've achieved, Lascelles should be a shorter price. I'm inclined to give a chance to one at a big price here, though, and it does involve a little bit of you've got to be slightly forgiving about it as well. Austrian Theory, who was a bit disappointing in the Superlative Stakes at Newmarket. Ironically, he ended up he raced up the centre, but he ended up furthest away from where the action unfolded. He was nearest the stand side that day. I thought he got a little bit lost. Now the horse who was drawn next to him finished second in that race, so it wasn't you couldn't say it was a massive disadvantage to be where he was. But I thought his lack of experience counted against him. In the middle of that race, he just got a little bit detached from the others and seemed to lose his way a little bit. That form is nowhere near good enough to get involved here, and indeed nor is his debut win at Doncaster, which came on firm ground. But I like him physically. I think there's a lot about him. He has the physical scope to do an awful lot better than he has. He's clearly a 7 furlong horse, which is a question mark for a lot of this field. And I was inclined to give him the benefit of the doubt. He's reminiscent in terms of his physique to Dark Vision, who won this for the Yard 3 years ago. And Mark Johnson could easily have run him. He was entered he still is actually entered in the nursery later in the week, and that would have been a much easier task for him, despite top weight. So the fact that he runs him in here, and he still has a Group 1 entry in Ireland, I thought that give you the hope that he would actually develop into the horse that he looked like he might be on debut. Now, I don't deny for a second that he needs to improve an awful lot on the clock and on the collateral form they've shown so far, but I don't like pigeonholing 2-year-olds after 1 or 2 runs. And I think there could be a fair bit more to come from him. And given there's question marks, as I said, about the Coventry form and about the suitability of 7 furlongs for a few of the field, I think he's worth having a small bet on at a big price. He's pretty much the outsider of the party, or close to it. Secret Strength, I think, is a bigger price. But he's 22 to 1. You might even get bigger than that on the day. And I think he wouldn't be a maximum stakes bet by any manner of means. But I think he's a sporting bet to small stakes.
Yeah, Austrian Theory currently 22 to 1 with Sky Bet, William Hill, Bet Victor, Mansion Bet, 10 Bet, Sport Nation, and Red Zone. But I think you can get a bit bigger on the exchange if you wanted to go that way. Or, as I say, Betfair Sportsbook are doing a 5th of 3 places despite there being 7 runners, and currently 18 to 1 there. So a couple of possible angles of attack there if you wanted to side with Rory's selection, Austrian Theory. But positive mentions from Rory and Andy for Lusail, the current second favourite as well. So a couple of ways to get involved with the vintage there. On to the Unibet Lennox Stakes now, and Charlie Appleby certainly has the pair of aces here. Space Blues the favourite at 2 to 1, and Creative Force at 3 to 1, second favourite. Safe Voyage 15 to 2, Ken Ross 8 to 1, Happy Power 12 to 1, Fundamental 20s, Real Appeal 20s, as is Dukes of Hazzard 22 to 1, Bar with 14 currently running. Most firms paying 4 places. And Rory, we'll come to you first for this renewal of the Lennox Stakes.
It looks very competitive on paper. There's a couple out there. I like Kinross back at 7 furlongs. I don't like stall 13 for him. That would be the concern. Otherwise, conditions look ideal for him, and he's an interesting player. Given that he bounced back to that debut form, having been gelded at Haydock last time out, and then he missed a run on fast ground subsequently. So the going has come very much in his favour. I've always thought the 7 furlongs was his trip, and I would have been with him if he'd had a kinder draw than stall 13. He's going to have to trust to luck from there. He's not going to go. It's not obviously going to go forward and try to get handy early on. So he needs this race to be run at the right kind of tempo and to allow him to come with a run down the outside. That's happened once or twice in the past. When Breton Rock won at 50 to 1, one of the biggest shock ever in this race, he was drawn out wide as well, and he didn't appear to have a great chance on paper. They're thoroughly exposed going into, so it can play into your hands occasionally, but it puts me off in the first instance. And I have to say, I end up coming back to Space Blues, who obviously hasn't been seen since disappointing at Meydan in March, but he's a horse who can go well fresh. He looks like he's been laid out for the race by Charlie Appleby, and significantly, he won the race last year. He wouldn't want it hawk deep, Space Blues, but he'll handle a bit of dig in the ground. And I don't think we're going to be looking at soft ground when this comes around. I think it'll be good to soft. He's in 12, which is again not absolutely ideal, but he does have the class to win this contest. It's just a case of getting the right kind of price about him. 2 to 1's is as short as I'd want to go with Space Blues, but he was very good in this race last year. and a repetition of that sort of form, which he's done several times. It's not like it's a standout effort. He's got a lot of very good efforts to put him close to the top of the tree here, and I think he'll be prime for it. William Buick prefers him to Creative Force, which I think is significant because Creative Force has been very progressive this season, and the fact that the Buick sticks with Space Blues suggests that he's showing the right signs at home. Whether I'd want to be piling in at 2-1 is another matter, but I think he's the clear pick in the race.
Space Blues, the clear pick, 2-1, the likely winner for Rory there. Andy, do you agree?
Yeah, I don't know whether he's a clear pick or not. It is significant, however, that William Buick has chosen to go for him, because I actually prefer the other one. A little bit born out of the fact that I suffered largely backing him last time out in the July Cup, and I didn't think he got the clearest to run through. I thought a strongly run 6 furlongs would be ideal for him because, prior to his win at Ascot, I had him down as a 6 furlong horse. He beat the likes of Significantly, Perotto, and when he won at Newbury, he had a Happy Romance behind him over that trip. And I was quite surprised that he managed to win the Jersey on soft ground. I thought 7 furlongs, soft ground, this is going to be a slogfest. And I didn't, like I say, I didn't peg him in that category. I thought he had a good turner. For all the times I've got him doing, and particularly his back-end sectionals, suggested to me that strongly run 6 furlongs is what he wanted. Like I say, he did surprise me when he won that day. So I thought, Newmarket, strongly run 6, stiff 6, absolutely bang on. But he ran very much like he wanted to go back up again. Incidentally, his back end 3 furlong splits were the best in the July Cup, given where he was at halfway. He got squeezed out as well when good effort was dropping back in his lap up the rail, and he had to try and force his way through. I don't think he got the clearest to runs. By then, the likes of Starman had flown over the horizon. But I still think that's very strong form. It was the hottest Group 1 we've seen for a little while, and it still suggested to me that he's going forward. He's not showing signs of decay after 5 runs. He's got a better draw than his main market rival and stable companion. It could be a bad draw if he doesn't get a clear run, of course, but to start off with, that's where you'd want to choose. And he's got 4 on soft ground as well. The fact that he won the Jersey on soft, again, beating a good field that day, I didn't see any sort of weaknesses in that lineup. I must admit, he'd be the one for me. I'm not disenchanted the fact that William Buick's chosen the other, because let's face it, he won this race last year, so he's probably entitled to stay loyal to the horse that has won this race before and knows Goodwood. But I do think if there was one horse good enough to beat him, it is going to be Creative Force, and I'd probably just stick with him under these conditions.
Creative Force 3-1, Space Blues 2-1. I said Charlie Appleby holds all the aces. I think Andy and Rory are holding 1 each. So it depends who you think has made the better case between the two at the top of the market there. Or maybe you can just back them to finish first and second, and everyone will be happy if that one comes in. In the Lennox, onto the 4th race of the day, and it is the Goodwood Cup, the Shaqab Goodwood Cup, and Stradivarius is the 6-4 favourite on the drift as we speak at the moment, with Trueshan 11-4, Spanish Mission 11-2, Saron Priestley 8-1, 14-1 bar. And just a few weeks ago, we were discussing Stradivarius and Trueshan at, what was it, 7-1? Was one of the bets of the week, and then Trueshan was a non-runner on the morning of the race, and now here we are 6-4, 11-4 after Stradivarius getting beat that day. Andy, that must be quite sore.
Yeah, it was one of the big disappointments of the whole 5-day Royal Ascot meeting for me, that Trueshan didn't run, and then 2 days or a day later, the heavens opened. We were obviously trying to predict what was going to happen in advance when we did the podcast, and it seemed the logical reason to believe that the reins would come in time for Trueshan to not only take his chance but to win the Gold Cup. I think had the race been run the day after, he probably would have won, given how it changed so abruptly. But even withstanding that Trueshan wasn't in the lineup, Stradivarius has to be pegged down as slightly disappointing. I know, Frankie was beating himself up for the ride he gave the horse, and he didn't get the clearest to run through at a vital stage. But ultimately, he didn't really pick up in the way that he might have done, or he has done in previous years, suggesting to me that if there is a little bit of residual decay, it might just be, getting into his system now. Let's face it, he's a 7-year-old. He's been on the go for a long, long time. Look, he's won this race 3 or 4 times before, hasn't he? So we don't want to be decrying him too much, but he's definitely at his most ineffective when the ground's soft. And Trueshan, conversely, he's a mud lover, as he proved when he beat Stradivarius easily under those conditions at Ascot last season. So in for a penny, in for a pound. Having probably had my biggest bet of the season on Trueshan several times at Royal Ascot and lost my money. There's only one way to get him back and to puff your chest out and roll the dice again. I just don't fancy anything else in the race. He's the only horse who I could see would want these conditions over 2 miles. So yeah, I'm going to stick with. I've already backed him actually. I backed him today. I backed him at 3-1 today. Not the price he was a couple of days ago, but then again, we didn't really envisage the rain that has come in the large quantities that has come. So you can't have it both ways, as it were. So yeah, Trueshan for me, very strong choice. I could actually see him going off favourite here.
I mean, have you backed him each way or win only at 3s out of interest?
I've had to go. I'd probably put him in an each way double with Creative Force. I think 3-1 the pair. If you can still get that, he's a good bit of business, because both of those 2 horses look as though they got cast iron chances.
Yeah, Trueshan 11-4 at the moment. That 3-1 long gone. 11-4 with 365 paddies and Betfair.
I think they're going to be very close to each other in the market. I think there could be 2-1 each of 2. But I think if you had to nominate a favourite now, I'd go with Trueshan. I think the momentum will be with him.
Rory, you were team Trueshan as well when we spoke about a month or so ago, just over a month ago. Is that still the case?
Very much so, yeah. I think the worst thing, just to open old wounds, the worst thing about his coming out of the Gold Cup, it was very late in the day, and I didn't even realise that that Alan King was considering taking him out. And I know the ground ended up being firm on the day. But if I'd realised there was a doubt about him running, I could have cashed out the bet for a pretty decent profit.
Yeah.
And the first I knew about it was just the announcement about half an hour before the race that he wasn't running. So. And
that was the thing, was that even though the conditions hadn't necessarily changed in his favour the way that you'd anticipated, the market certainly had, and he was.
Yeah, it was really strong in the market.
3-1, 7-2 when he came out.
To guess that it was a possibility. And as I said beforehand, he doesn't need the ground hopped. He handles it. But as long as it's good, I think he's absolutely fine. I'd be all over him here. Frankie got murdered for his ride on Stradivarius at Ascot. I agree with Andy. I don't think he ever looked like winning at any stage. And Frankie was in trouble to some degree before he got pocketed. It wasn't like Frankie thinks his races through really well at Ascot, and he knew what he wanted to do with Stradivarius that day, and he simply couldn't avoid the trouble that he get into. Partly because, interestingly, Joey Sheridan on Princess Zoe got up on his outside and basically had him in a pocket for the best part of a mile. And I thought that was an interesting aspect of the race that I don't want to say Frankie rode a great race by any manner of means, but he was essentially outridden tactically by a youngster who'd never ridden at Ascot before. So I think Joey Sheridan deserves an awful lot of credit for basically creating that scenario that maximised Princess Zoe's chance and minimised Stradivarius. But as Andy says, he didn't pick up well enough in the straight. He didn't do too badly. He was beaten 7 lengths in the end, and that was more than he lost. I think, however that race panned out, he would not have won. And I think he is vulnerable now. We saw that a couple of times last season. Obviously, in his final start, he'd had a tough campaign, and they wanted to go for the arc with him. And it ended up being a pretty weak arc, and he was disappointing in that, quite frankly. So his air of invincibility in the staying races has disappeared to a large degree. I think connections have been tremendously sporting with him, but now is the time to be taking him on. And Trueshan, I think, I can't believe it was 11-2 or 6-1 for this a couple of days ago. I think that was absolutely crazy price. But unfortunately, I wasn't switched on enough to notice that. So I've missed all the fancy odds. But despite the fact that he's halved in price, I think he still represents a touch of value. And I think Andy's right. I think the market has opposed Stradivarius in this race a couple of times in the past, where he's looked like a 2-to-1 onshot and he's drifted to even money. I think the bookmakers will be very keen to take him on, and I think they'll be wary of Trueshan. So as long as the going appears to be on the soft side, then I think Trueshan has got every chance of starting favourite here, and I can't really look beyond him, to be honest.
Trueshan, the good thing. Again, let's hope this time we at least get a run for our money tomorrow afternoon. I think we can say with some degree of certainty that should be the case. Trueshan 11-4 with 365 paddies and Betfair Sportsbook. Onto the final race we're going to be covering in detail. It's the Back to Goodwood Handicap, the 410, where King of Stars is the 5-to-1 favourite ahead of Ruwayat at 6-to-1 and Astronaut 8-to-1, only spoofing Lord Riddleford and Jabberwocky all 10-1, 16-1 bar Rory. Open race this again, 17 runners as it stands. Skybet going 6 places, all the others mainly going 5. Who do you fancy at the moment?
I'd want to be drawn lowish here. It tends to be an advantage over 5 furlongs. At Goodwood, you've got a little bit of speed there as well with not a little bit of speed, a lot of speed with the El Astronauti and Ruwayat drawn at 2 and 3. And I think that'll be a big plus to only spoofing, who'd be my pick in the race. He's drawn in stall 4, so he'll get a lovely toe into the race. He's suited by a downhill 5 furlongs. He ran an absolute cracker when he was second in the dash at Epsom. He followed that with another solid run at the Curragh. And Ascot wouldn't have been his cup of tea last time out, when he was only 8th, behind significantly. That was a very, very different setup race wise, and I think you can draw a line through it. He will be a lot happier back on slightly slower ground, and at Goodwood, which will suit him. He's a course and distance winner in the past. Kevin Coleman takes him over again for this and has booked Tom Marquand to ride him again as he did at Epsom. I think he's got a lot in his favour, and given that he's on the same mark as when he was second in the dash, I think he's hard to get away from in terms of each way betting, because he's got the form in the book, he's got conditions in his favour, and he seems to have the ideal setup in the race as well, with 2 of the fastest horses in the race to follow. So I'd be very disappointed if only spoofing is outside the 4 here. He looks a really solid each way punt.
Only spoofing 10-1, best price at the moment. That is with 365, who are a quarter the 4. If you wanted more places, I should say, you're going to be looking at 8-1, which is pretty much across the board elsewhere. With, as you say, Tom Marquand riding. Andy.
Yeah, I'm very keen to stay on a piece of form from the July meeting. I think one of the nicest horses I saw from that 3-day fixture was Twilight Calls of Henry Candy's, who justified favourites in winning a 5-furlong sprint handicap. He got beaten the time before by Imperial Yellow, was it? Imperial, I'm sure it was Imperial Yellow. The horse of Roger Varians that won Saturday. So that form's pretty solid. But they dropped him back to 5 furlongs at Newmarket, and he was brilliant, absolutely brilliant. He was the only horse at that 3-day festival that ran below 33 seconds for the last 3 furlongs. He actually did 32.3, which, given it's an uphill finish, that's a staggering sectional. And the overall time figure was very healthy as well. Courtesy of King of Stars, who made the running over on the far side rail. He dragged them along, but the front 2 were 4 lengths clear of the rest. And I've been monitoring the form just to see how it's worked out. The 5th has won, Gel Horn. Han Solo Berger, the 6th, just got beat by Passional. Sahek was 4th at Sandown, the 10th horse. Yamu ran well at Newmarket Saturday. And the last horse, Operatic, 14 of 14, popped up and won at Windsor the other day. So the time figure and everything about that race at Newmarket looked a class race for the grade, and it has worked out accordingly. So I think King of Stars is the right favourite. I definitely have him on my mind in some way, shape or form, because I do think that Twilight Calls is a group horse. What group level he'll end up being at, I don't know, but he's Henry Candy, Twilight Sun family, so he's going to go down that route. He's going to end up sort of in pattern races at some stage in his career. And I'd also have a little bit of a saver on the one that finished 7th, Embor, of Ruth Cars, who finished 7th, but he was stranded down the middle of the track where he was obviously favoured to be on that far side rail. You know, he ran about as well as we could have expected from a relatively exposed handicapper drawn in the middle against, you know, potential group horses. But I did notice he's got some form here at Goodwood when I looked at this race this morning. Finished second behind Green Power back in 2019, and he ran respectably in the Stewards Cup. But 5 furlongs is definitely his bag. And if Rory's right about the draw, somewhere down the middle, I don't think so. Not too bad a place to be. Particularly he's right by King of Stars this time, whereas last time he wasn't. So yeah, those are the two I'd be looking at. I do think, like I say, I do think that Newmarket Sprint Handicap's very strong form.
So following the form line there, Embor 16-1. That's with 365, and then King of Stars the favourite 5-1 with a fair few firms at the moment. So those are the first five races of the day. The 4:45 is a maiden, which is yet to be priced up. And then we have the 5:20, which is the Unibet Fillies handicap, where I think just Hills have put their prices out now. And the final race of the day is the Whirlpool handicap, the final race, another Fillies handicap as well. Again, just Hills out with their prices, and a horse you just mentioned topping that market in Gelhorn, who you raced in that Newmarket race you're following there, Andy. So let's start with you in that case, and any other business from those last 3 races of tomorrow's racing.
Yeah, it's really odd. Normally, when we do any of the businesses, we'll say 1 or 2 little nuggets here, there, and everywhere. But I genuinely haven't got anything I'm looking to back.
No business.
No, I don't know if Rory's got time. I'm hoping he has, because otherwise this is going to be a bit of a blank slot. But yeah, obviously Gelhorn's got a squeak, but you know it's up over 6 furlongs now on soft ground, and he's up against several informed fillies. I do think Marcus Dragoning's ran quite well in the maiden at Newbury today, also called Olivetti. I'd be looking to see how he shaped a second time up, because having missed the break, I thought he ran a race full of promise. But it's over to Rory here. He's got a complete and utter stay to himself. Rory,
take us away.
Yeah, I'm not crazy about fillies handicaps as a rule, and we've got non-runners in the last 2 races as well already. The one that I thought was definitely worth a look is Pomelo in the penultimate race, the mile contest. Now, she wouldn't want the ground hog deep, and she was very disappointing at Royal Ascot in the Sandringham, but the ground was really bad there, and I'm inclined to forgive that run. She was made a 5-4 favourite to win the Prestige Stakes here last season, and she finished last of the 5 that day. But Harry Bentley, who rode her, came all the way across to the stand side rail, whereas Isabella Giles, who won it, did cut across, came wide as well, but didn't track over quite so far, saved ground by doing so. I thought that was a run to probably put a line through as well. She won her other 2 starts last year. She won it on debut at Newbury in good ground, and then she followed up that disappointment by winning a novice at Wolverhampton. I think it's difficult to weigh her form up. She's been given a handicap mark of 89, and obviously she ran poorly off that market at Royal Ascot. I think that's a run you couldn't judge her on, and the fact that she's won 2 from 3 last year, and she retains scope for better. She's not a filly to back at a short price, but I think there's more to come from her, and I think she might end up being underrated off a mark of 89. And yeah, again, if the ground turned out really soft, if it rained further before racing, I'd be inclined to leave her alone. I think she probably wouldn't run in those conditions. But I think it was good to sort of be fine. It was you know just on the soft side of good for her debut. She's there's nothing in her pedigree to say she wants fast ground as such. She just ended up on very deep ground twice and disappointed. And as I said, I think there are reasons why you could forgive that. I probably want double figures to back her, because, you know, as I said, while she's capable of better, she's hard to pigeonhole. Yeah. And she's not one you can be massively confident about. But at the same time, there's a very strong possibility that her mark doesn't do her justice. So if she was a double figure price, I think she'd be worth a bet.
Pomelo currently 7-1, so too short for Rory, but keep your eyes peeled to see if that price does drift. That brings us to an end of our glorious Goodwood Day 1 Tuesday racing preview. Plenty of strong fancies there from both Rory and Andy. Thank you both for taking the time to chat to us today. If you have enjoyed this, either as a podcast, you can find it on all days previews on any podcast platform, or as a video on the YouTube channel as well. Please do subscribe to the YouTube channel. Please also download the oddschecker app. As I say, it's where you get the best prices, bookie offers, free bets, place terms and tipsters. Andy's column every day going up around 9 o'clock in the morning on the oddschecker app. Hopefully we've given you a few winners. Sorry this first day came a little bit late, but we're going to record day 2 right now. So if you've watched this or listened to this, it won't be long until you can get day 2's preview a little bit further in advance. Please do enjoy the racing and please do gamble responsibly.